Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to costumeco. I am so delighted and thrilled today because I have a panel of creative experts who are here with us today, who all worked on Shōgun, which is an amazing show. I hope you all had a chance to see it. It's fabulous, and it's been nominated for, I believe, about 25 Emmy Awards, which is maybe unprecedented. I'm not sure. Dean's doing the countdown. So anyway, I'm glad for those of you who are able to join us today live, but this will also be recorded. So if you didn't get to see it in like live, you'll be able to watch it on the record. And also, if you have any comments or questions for our panel, please put them in the chat and we'll try to adjust them as we go along. So to get started, what we're going to do is just go around. I'm going to pick on somebody and I'm going to ask them to just introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do in their department. So Helen, I'm going to start with you. Sorry to pick on you first. Hopefully I didn't catch you off guard. So
No,
Helen, why don't you tell everybody a bit about yourself and what you do?
well, I was a production designer on the series, and for me, it was actually it was my first actual production design credit after many years of being a supervising art director, which is a slightly different job. It's all about project management as opposed to, well, it's a combination of the creative and project management. I had a crew, I think about something like 15 people in total. It varied slightly, working in the art department on the show. And there were art directors, assistant art directors, set designers, and graphic designers. And I started in January of 21, and I crewed up, and I think it was about March when we really got going. We were still under COVID protocols, so we were all working from home, which made things a little tricky at first. But yeah, we sailed on until finally we finished shooting on June the 30th of 22, and which is now over 2 years ago, if you can believe that. And yeah, that's it. And I work with these lovely people here.
Thanks so much, Helen. So I've had Dean on before. He's been on a few times actually. So Dean, for those of you who don't know who Dean is, Dean, why don't you tell everyone a bit about yourself and what you did on the show?
My name's Dean Eilertson, and I was the property master on Shōgun. Technically, everything you see on screen handled by an actor is considered a prop quite often, and that gave us quite a diverse range of things to research and source. Everything from the weapons to I was assigned a task with Set Deck to build boats, which was kind of funny because we didn't have a picture car coordinator, so somebody needed to build them, and so we ended up building those. And had 2 full-time buyers in Japan, sourcing as we went along. We had a system called Airtable. I'd have a meeting with them on a Sunday, which would be their Monday morning. And I'd tell them what I'm looking at this week and what I want to start making choices on. You have 10 episodes, so that's the most intimidating thing you could ever take on because you have all 10 episodes. Do you ever go into a Lordco, a parts store, and they have the catalogs on the top of the counter? Well, that's what I had on my desk with 10 scripts in it, and I had to read all 10. I got through the first 3 or 4, and then I just freaking out and go to work. And there came a point where I had to go home and stay away for a couple of days and get through the rest of them and read them all because you're looking constantly for anything, and it's always coming up on auction sites. So yeah, quite an amazing thing to stare at that much paper in front of you on the desk. And that was it. We had 22 weeks, which was the first time in my career to have that long to prep, and I think we used every last minute of it.
Dean, it's from my perspective, but it looks like you're wearing Toranaga's helmet.
I know.
The way
I love it.
Oh yeah,
I love it. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Oh, I love it. That's amazing.
Okay, hold it. Wait.
Speaking of helmets, Carlos, who has come back, thank goodness. I'm so pleased to have you back. And you introduced me to Dean. The two of you, are just like 2 peas in a pod, I think. Why don't you tell everybody a bit about yourself and what you did on the show?
Yeah, so I was the costume designer on Shōgun, And most of my, the most important part of my crew was in Vancouver. They are the ones who made all the costumes for all our lead characters, and that crew was about maybe maximum 125 people, but we had different teams in other parts of the world that were helping us to make the costumes. We hired Siam Costumes in Thailand to help us make our stock for our background costumes. We made a lot of the armors in China, and then we had a team of 2 people that in Japan that were helping us to find authentic Japanese fabrics. I started kind of late in the game. I started in May 2021, so it was less than 5 months before we started shooting. So it was a bit fast and furious. And my job as a costume designer is really to, in this specific case, to do a lot of research to understand the specifics of this period, the language of the clothing of this period. And so I need to take, different things in consideration, like the differences between all the different ranks. And then to that, when I design the costumes for the characters, I need to take in consideration their emotional arc and their storyline throughout 10 episodes.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And also, I have a wonderful interview with Carlos and 2 with Dean. So I will put those also in the description below if anybody didn't have a chance to see them. But also, we have some lovely new guests. I have Lisa and Jonathan, who are both set decorators. So Lisa, do you want to start? And then we can go to Jonathan after?
Sure. That works just fine. So Jonathan and I are, as you mentioned, are the set decorators. And fortunately, Helen gave us the chance to be part of her team in this fantastic show, and we had a lot of fun working on this. It was an epic project. The timelines, as always, were tight, and the builds were incredible. We built almost everything, or sourced it with Dean, and brought in antiques, and then of course, because we were in the, as you know, the Sengoku period. I can never say that properly. Sengoku period versus Edo, a lot of the antiques that we bought tended to be a little later in the period, so we would modify them, in conjunction with the scrolls and Helen's design, and come up with our set dressing. And we had Dean and Jonathan and I had, and Carlos as well, but we had so much fun in the sense of in the sheer panic of being able to get these items in time, especially by using buyers that were in Japan to help us out with some of this. As Dean mentioned, we'd get on Airtable and he would come up with his list of what he bought in the morning, and I'd be, look what I bought, and we would jostle it back and forth, and we'd sit down in the office, and it was almost a competition. And that to me was one of the real highlights that we had in this whole collaborative effort. And it really, and so much more. Helen's art department was absolutely tremendous in everybody jumping in to help everybody else. And everything that we were doing, working with Carlos to make sure the colors didn't clash from what he was using, and picking those fabrics and materials, and getting fabrics and materials to make our own items from, the different, there was many different types of sleeping mats and sleeping screens. And so we had this marvelous facility that we just started building from anything and everything. And like I said, the biggest thing was it was a real team collaborative effort on everybody's parts. But I'll let Jonathan speak.
I guess I could speak. That's very good.
Yes.
Well, Lisa summarized a ton of it, and Dean summarized the rest. I'm more involved in the side of getting the things from the shop into the set and everything else, where Lisa did look after fabrics more than I did, and it's a collaborative effort between the two of us that that it takes, especially on this show with the size and everything else, and just the timelines that we had to work within. So it was a great show. It seems that 2 years have flown by very quickly since we finished.
Thanks, Jonathan. I just want to say hello to a few people. Alicia's here, AU, Mother Roying, Carl Karsnark. Who else am I missing here? Kitty dressed in pink. So I was just telling everyone at the beginning, if you have any questions for our panel, put them in the comments and I'll do my best to get them to ask them. So before we start, maybe we'll do this by a show of hands. Maybe that'll be quicker. Who had known about the James Clavell book or had read it before they started on this project?
I'd known about it. I hadn't read it though.
Okay.
I also knew about it, but I didn't
Yeah.
read it.
And Dean maybe and who had watched, I know Carlos, I know I think you said your parents had watched the 1980s Shōgun. Who here was familiar with it or had watched it before you started? Oh, pretty much everyone. Okay.
No.
I had watched it as a kid. So, and I know because I think Carlos, you and I were talking about it. You didn't want to be sort of, you wanted to go by the script. You didn't want to have the book influence.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I felt that show was beautifully made, but it was for the 80s. It was a different generation. We've come a long way in our industry, and I think that this was a completely different aesthetic with a different team and a different location too. And I think for me as a costume designer, my job is to support the vision of the showrunners and work in collaboration with all these people in this in this panel. And so focusing too much on all these different references and the show from the 80s and the book, it really kind of to me personally stops kind of the creative flow from happening. Every project is their own entity, in a way. And I think that to me, in order to be open to what it wants to be, I just need to be sort of, working out of a wide canvas.
I agree. I felt I was doing the 10 script, not the book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, does everybody want to tell me, I know a little bit about how Carlos and Dean got involved. How did everybody else get involved? Helen, I know you're in BC. Jonathan and Lisa, where are you located? Are you in Canada?
Yeah, we're in BC as well. We work out.
Oh, you're all in BC. Okay, so Carlos is the only one who is in France.
Yes, Carlos is the fancy one.
He's the fancy one. So how did everyone hear about the did you get contacted? Do you want to let us Helen, why don't we start with you?
I got contacted by another production designer who was going to do the show, who I'd worked with before. He stayed with he asked me if I'd be the supervising art director on the show over Christmas of 2021 and 2020. I met with him a few times on Zoom over the winter into January. And then he was working on a show in Berlin at the time, and they'd had terrible weather. His show was delayed. And he rang me one day to say that he was pulling out of the show. So that left me in a quandary. I thought, okay, well, so they started to interview other designers. And I think at that point, it might have been about a week or 2 weeks that they interviewed other people. And then they came back to me and asked me if I would like to design it. And I was over the moon to do that because I'd read all the 10 scripts and I was really excited to do to do the sets. And to design them was just, heaven. So that's how I got involved. And then Dean and I were working together on a show while all this was happening. And I said to Dean, "You've got to come and join me. Come on, Do you think it was too big at first? I can't remember. Yes, you did." And I was like, "No, you've got to come do it. You must do it with me." And then I scouted around trying to find decorators, and John and Lisa had been heavily recommended to me. And we started. What did we do? We Zoomed, I guess.
Yes.
We met as well. We went over to the studio, and that all seemed to fall into place nicely. So that's how the four of us Vancouver-based, got onto the project.
Mhm.
And what about you, Carlos? I know you told me, but do you want to just give a short little?
For me, I remember it was, early 2021, and I got an email from one of the producers at McDonald's. And so I've known him for a long time, because actually my first job as an assistant designer was on Three Kings, and he was one of the producers, and we always stay in touch because he speaks a little bit of French. And we always tried to work together, but it never worked out. And until he sent me that email, and I looked into it, I read the scripts. I never thought in a gazillion million years that they would give it to me. I knew that everybody was going to be fighting for it. It was a very beautiful project, period, very sort of, prestigious, based on a very well-known, loved book. But, I did a lot of research. We had 3 interviews, and at the end, Justin Marks, our showrunner, gave me the job.
And aren't we lucky?
I was going to say, and thank God he did. Well, first off, I one of the things I wanted to say, just listening to this conversation, is I love hearing so much about how the 6 of you, or I'm the 6th, 5 of you collaborate. And I know there were other departments that you worked very closely with. So tell me a little bit about how that worked. Like, Carlos, I remember you mentioning Helen. I think her office was close to you.
Yes, I think to
Were you
me,
near each other?
yeah. So every morning I had to go through Ellen's office. And of
me
course,
too. Yeah.
my eyes were going everywhere every time I was crossing that office. So I was looking at everything that was on the tables and the drawings, and that really kind of gave me a good idea of where
Yeah.
Ellen was going. And that was really very helpful for me to see, what her inspiration and her directions were, that really influenced my work, definitely.
Absolutely. And I likewise, I went through your department 10 times a day just to get down to the stages. So I was always looking at stuff on mannequins, illustrations, and I'm going, oh my God, and my heart would race. I go, God, I've really got to do as good as this. Yeah.
But
Yeah, and Dean, sorry, go ahead, Carlos.
No, I was going to say that I feel like, I don't know what you think, Ellen, but and Lisa and John, but I felt like the color palettes is what brought all of us together. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I do remember actually very early on in the process, and I thought, okay, now I didn't. We met a couple of times, Carlos, I think, and I thought, okay, right, I better get my color palette together, and I'll come over and have all these fabric swatches and the things that I think I'm going to use. And it's funny because as I looked around the room and you had all of your beautiful fabrics, all your illustrations there, and I just thought, wow, everything that I'm thinking of meshes with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's nothing jarring. I do remember one of the directors, the director on the first episode, said to me, well, Helen, can't you add more color to the sets? Can't you? So I did this exercise for a few days where I worked with Kirsten, our illustrator, where we sort of took the walls and we made them mauve and then we made them blue. And I go, oh my God, this is so wrong. Like the colors need to be muted, like mute. And for me, it became more about just getting nice textures in the sets. And everything just seemed to sort of mesh so well with what you were doing, Carlos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was an interesting process. I sort of abandoned having a formal color palette. You were much more disciplined than me. I think I was on the fly a little bit because sometimes I'd have so much to do. I had to make so many choices on colors. And you just go, right, I hope I've made the right choice. But then miraculously, everything did seem to mesh. So.
Yeah, and
Helen, that brings up a good point because you have multiple directors too, right? So it's
Yes.
How did the whole team here find, like, you have the showrunner vision, but then you have the individual directors. Sorry, Carlos, you were going to say something.
Somebody said, yeah.
Well, you listen to the showrunner.
Yeah.
They are the boss.
They're the boss.
Well,
Yeah.
So the directors listen to the showrunner as well. So there is a pecking order to the decision making, I think, and the approvals, and it's definitely started with Justin and his wife. Yeah,
it's true.
But I was going to say that I think that there is something that sometimes happens that is magical, is the fact that sometimes the collaboration is not verbal. Is that in a way, we are all professional. We've been in this industry for a long time, and this visuals that we've created, the way they came up with is the fact that all of us really connected as a team. And sometimes by just looking at a board, at a drawing, we know where this, the spirit of this project is going. And it doesn't need to be verbal. You don't need to have a Zoom with somebody. You don't need to have a conversation. You just know where it's going. And I think in that regard, I feel like sometimes it's magical. I go sometimes to sets and, everybody's busy. We haven't had the time to, think about every detail or every color palette. And somehow things come together magically at the last minute because all of us are working from the same place, from the same foundation, and we work with directors and showrunners that have a very specific vision that lead us towards that goal, but I'm always impressed by that phenomenon that happens that is beyond words, that is just this energy, creative energy that you connect with, and at the end it just appears magically and you're like, wow, this is magical.
It's like osmosis. I agree with you entirely, and I think for me, seeing the camera tests, that was the first time I thought my heart was fluttering. I thought, oh my God, look at this.
Yeah.
All of these ingredients, and then throw a bit of smoke in there. It looks fantastic. I was very excited. I mean, the camera tests and the first dailies that came through, I was just a flutter at how well it had all meshed together and continued throughout the show.
I think one of our talks, Heidi, I made a reference to that. It was one of the earlier second week of filming. We're at Manatee Bay, and it was our first day down at the beach.
Yes,
and everything was in place, and we might have had upwards of 300 people that day. Where Carlos, your department was starting to dress them at 2 a.m, and then through hair and makeup, and then brought down on the set and propped, and now you're standing there and there's atmospheric smoke over the water. There's set dressing in the background and on the shores. There's people standing there. And
a lovely location too, that was.
Yeah.
I kind of get emotional every time when you think about something like that and you realize, oh my God, we're doing it.
Yeah.
And it took an absolute army. It really did to put it all together and to see everybody working together and how all the colors and how everything came together. It really was magical, especially when you see it all coming through the mist, which is all our smoke machines, etc., etc. And it's almost a tearjerker from the amount of work that you put through, and you're there 110% for long hours, and then you see what you all do together, and every piece was absolutely seamless.
I think it's that is the sheer
Carl has a question.
Okay. Civilian or military designs first. Okay.
So do you want me to answer to this question, Heidi? Heidi? Oh.
Internet, please.
Yeah, so Carl's asking, speaking of armies, did they start with the civilian or military designs first? Mm-hmm.
So we did. We
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. I think I had a little delay there.
Yeah.
Are you okay answering this question? Maybe Carlos, do you want to answer this question? Speaking of armies, did they start with civilian or military designs first?
Yeah, we definitely started with the armies, for sure, with the armors. That was my first job, as a matter of fact, on day one, because we needed to put that into manufacturing as soon as possible. Actually, on day one of shooting, we had the Green Army working in Tofino, right? And so I wanted to give our team in China as much time as possible to make the those armors. So the first 6 weeks, 7 weeks on the job were definitely designing all the different armors for the lords, and then for all the different ranks of every different group. And so that was really the first step before anything else.
Well, and Dean, that probably also affected your department as well, because you had all the props that had to go with the costumes and so on. So did you do that as well? Did you start with the armies?
I maybe started out touching too many things at once, and that ends up making you feel a little overwhelmed. And after Carlos and I had met a couple times, I realized the swords, for example, for the green and brown and whatever armies we were doing, the colors of the cordage had to really blend in and match what he was doing. So I completely changed directions and went through Jack in China to find a manufacturer for us and make most of those there using cordage that I knew was going to show up and match what Carlos was doing. So yeah, that was a big deal.
That's true. I totally forgot about that, but that was the first step. When we started to, the first concept was actually to try to rent those armors, but the problem is that there was a color code, and we needed a lot of armors, and we couldn't find in Japan the armors that were matching our colors and the quantity that were needed. And so that's when we started talking about making those armors. That's true. That was the first step.
What about you, Helen? Like, where did you sort of start? Because you'd have all your banners.
Yes. You're frozen. I'm just going to keep talking though. Where did I started really, I had to start with the scenery. You know, obviously there were masses of sets. I started working on the stage sets. We were delayed in getting the stage sets, actually, the stages, because of COVID. There was another film in there prior to us gaining the stages. So we were treading water a little bit. We had to prefabricate scenery. The biggest set for me to start with was the Great Hall, the Osaka Palace sets. I had 2 large stages to work with, and we got cracking on that architecture right away. I was lucky because I had 2 really good set designers on early, just me and 2 set designers for about a month, one of whom started working on the ships, and the other working with me on the palace itself. So that was my first push, was to get those sets underway, because I knew that they were the most decorative. They had the most handwork. You know, the amount of construction work to pull those sets off was enormous. At the same time, we were out looking at locations, choosing the back lots, and getting another team of people to start designing samurai houses, fishing village, and piling more people onto every single area all at once. And the city of Osaka, which was a backlot set. So yeah, it seemed that we were firing on all cylinders right away, which is great. I just had a fantastic team of people. And John and Lisa just jumped right in and did their thing. And I was amazed when I first came to your workshop. I was like, "Oh my God, we've got like 100 people there, and ships and boats and baskets." And like, you really grasped the horn. I don't know the expression. Anyway, you ran with it, which was fantastic, because I was running with it, and I was like, "Thank God you're running with it too." You know, like we're all running. You know, because there's just so much to do, and it was very exciting. It was really fun.
Oh, Lisa and Jonathan, so where did you source everything? Like, because I know Carlos was saying I know you made a lot of stuff in-house, Carlos, but you also had to, job things out to Siam costumes. And Dean, you had to order. Dean and I had a very extensive chat about him buying a bunch of items from a seller who sold him. What was a saddle, Dean? It was like, was it 1600s?
Yeah, the one I had to take apart and repair had an inscription underneath, which normally you would never see. And once I had it all cut apart, I had it translated, and it said March, lucky day, 1634, and the name of the maker. And it was just shocking. It's like, I've got 20 of these things. They're all 300-year-old saddles, and I'm using them on horses and putting actors on them. And I'm just hard to get my head wrapped around the fact that we had so many antiques, so many amazing pieces showing up. And I'd buy lacquerware that was still sealed in a box that had been bought 200 years earlier. The receipt was still in the box, and it has never been reopened. So at the time they were buying antiques 200 years ago, and now I just bought them off auction and opened the box for the first time in that long.
Amazing.
It was
Mhm.
it didn't matter if they were combs, if it was matchlock rifles, it just on and on. It pretty amazing.
It was such an excitement. I feel like we were all strangers in a strange land, like we'd never been here before. And so every day was about just huge discoveries like that. And yeah, it was quite an experience traveling to 17th century Japan. I mean, who could have ever imagined doing so?
Yeah.
And you know, and it was those instances that led to even more tasks, because when Dean took apart the saddle, of course, we as the set deck, he's like, this is really cool. And so then as he pulled it apart, part of the easier way to read that description was once you pulled a mold for the base of that saddle. And of course it was fortuitous because we had to dress, 40 plus shops in Osaka. And we were like, okay, now we're making saddles. And so, because we obviously didn't want to use Dean's antique saddles to put out in the weather, because it's ever changing in Vancouver, and a lot of stuff would be displayed when the shops were open out on the streets. So we then became saddle makers, and we found fabrics and things that would withstand the weather, and we treated them and we aged them, and again picked in conjunction with what Dean had purchased and what he had, and borrowed some of his pieces to put on our saddles as well. And we became saddle makers. And that is sort of, one of the instances of one department going down one thing, and because we were building everything together. And in set deck, we really did have to make pretty much everything that we came across. And even if we didn't, and we were able to order some things and get things through the auction and get it from Japan, some of the specifics were exactly like the straw ropes, and to keep it authentic for when we were doing the ships. They were very important. And our very first order was tatami mats, and we sat down long and hard with Helen for those, because we had to have those manufactured in huge quantities. And of course, they had to come from overseas. Yeah, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. And then get them on a ship and try to get them to Vancouver in a time when all our shipping had changed. And they were too heavy to put on planes like some of the other dressing. Thank goodness for production that we could do that. Like a cart that we could buy to learn how to make a wheel and a cart, because we needed multiples of these. So we, bought an antique cart. Dean bought them as well, and we cut them in half and we put them on a plane, and then we got them and tried to figure out how to build them in North America. Same idea with the buckets. We would buy a couple antiques and sake barrels and things like that, and then turn around and go, okay, now how do we reproduce what takes a man 30 years to learn in Japan, how to bend bamboo around these buckets that we would make, and trying to make them in the right period. So then we had to try to fast track. How are we going to get it done in this timeline?
That's why we had the army, Lisa. The army in the back.
This was the army.
They became master mold makers and bamboo tires and laminators and casters. We had
every.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Welding things and casting. Yeah.
Yeah, you had a whole medieval village in your shop then.
We did, yes. It was unstoppable. They were all 110% into. They were almost so overwhelming that sometimes you had to tell the guys back off. we need a minute to figure this out. But it was good. Yeah. But I always laugh between Dean and Lisa and the auction site. It was a competition who was up first to get the pieces.
The competition was. Yeah, it was always like, I got this. would you like to have it? It's yours. And that's what it really was all about. There was, it was absolutely sharing anything and everything. And that's what made this team so special.
That's amazing. And then Carlos, I know you had a massive team as well. Between all the breakdown artists and the dyers and the sewers and the milliners. Did you want to just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, Justin intention was to be as authentic as possible, and so that takes a lot of time, a lot of research. We had to create we brought a lot of fabrics from Japan, but we also created a lot of our own textiles that we printed and silk screened, and so that takes a big textile department to create those textiles, but also to break down everything. Everything needed to be lived in, and I think it shows in the visuals. And so, yeah, we were about 125, 150 people. I've never had a workroom as big as this one. I think there were like 5, cutter feeders, each one with their team of 2, 3 seamstresses. And, we had so many costumes to make that the workshop was working, around the clock. Even if we wanted to rent, it would have not been possible because actually our characters were very defined by the color palette. So, in order to just keep that harmonious color palette and those very strong visuals, we needed to make everything, and somehow in my perspective as a costume designer, it's actually always easier when you have the budget and the possibility to create everything. It's so much stronger than when you start sort of borrowing elements from here and from there and trying to make them work. So, but in that regard, we needed a lot of support from a great creative team, and people that were experts in Japanese textiles, coordinators, people that were also experts in kimono dressing, because it takes 2-3 people to dress each time one of the characters for about 45 minutes, so we needed a lot of those set dressers. So yeah, it takes a village, it takes more than a village to make this happen.
Amazing. Helen, what about you? Like, I mean, I know you had Jonathan and Lisa on your team, but how many people were on your team?
Well, my team included all the construction and paint department. And I honestly have lost track. There were hundreds. It fluctuated every week. But we had hundreds of people working in 5 different locations. We had the whole stage crew. So we had our sort of teams of people who did nothing but shoji screens, and teams of people who made thousands, tens of thousands of tiles for the rooftops. And every team had their own sort of skill. Like, we had people who are really great at fine woodwork, and yeah, there were hundreds of people working on the shop floor and at all the different locations. In the art department itself, I think it fluctuated between about 15 and 18 people in total, and those people, most of the department stayed on from about March through till Christmas. After Christmas, we then had 6 more months of shooting, but most of our main sets were established. We were just dealing with episodic sets. So we sort of pared down to a smaller crew of about 6 or 7 people. And actually, we were very streamlined. Once we got to that stage, all of the huge sets were well established. But we did have, between the fantastic construction department and paint, we had easily 300 plus people on any given day, all over the place, all over the different locations that were being worked on simultaneously. So there's a lot of driving. I drove a lot between.
Yeah, I was going to say you'd probably were wearing running shoes, having to, go from one spot to well, all of you probably did have to wear running shoes.
Quite far flung, some of the locations. So when you go from one extreme to the other, it would take half the day to get there and back. Mm-hmm. So, but you had to go. You had to keep your finger on the pulse.
Did everyone have to wear a name tag or something just so you could keep track of what everyone's names were? Like, I mean, Carlos, I don't know if you were able to remember everyone in your department's name.
Yeah, in my department,
Maybe you have
yes.
that gift.
I mean, yeah, we have long hours and we work nonstop for months and months. So, but then I would go to set, and there were so many people on set that, I mean, I barely knew, by name a quarter of them.
Yeah, of
So
course.
yeah.
By the way, speaking of set, so what was the first experience like when you had, like, for instance, when some of the cast arrived on set? Like, Helen, that must have been just an amazing experience for you. Or Carlos, when you first saw everyone in costume, or Dean, when you first saw everyone, in full outfit, or with your props. What were your feelings there?
I can say for me that it was the ceremonial hall when I saw your work, Ellen, and all of you. I mean, it blew me away. It was so magnificent. It was so beautiful. And in that regard, the itataris, the ceremonial outfits that the lords are wearing in those scenes in the ceremonial hall, needed to be also very ornated and very luxurious to be able to live, within that beautiful set. So in that regard, in the beginning, I thought, well, maybe those costumes are a little bit too elaborated, but there had to be a balance between the incredibly beautiful set that Ellen designed and the balance with my costumes, so those characters would still be able to live within that magnificent space.
That was a big day, wasn't it?
Yeah,
When
that was
when
beautiful.
that set opened, people were
That was
a
amazing.
bit stunned, I think, especially when the actors came on in costume. It's like,
Yeah.
I was a bit speechless. I know Justin took me by the hand, and he walked me. Everybody was milling around waiting, and he walked every single square foot of the set, and he with just me, and he said, he said, I had no idea. It was like lost for words. And I
Wow,
thought,
so it
oh my.
even exceeded his
I
expectations.
think it's funny because people had, all through the building process, all sorts of people had made their way through. There'd been different groups, including Justin, but nothing was fully together. It wasn't until we actually got the gardens fully in place and the set was lit and everything was in place, all the beautiful ornaments and things were in and then the actors came on in costume. It was quite wild. It was, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about
beautiful.
you, Dean?
Big day.
I know you mentioned that one scene down by the water. Was there the
Yeah.
first time you saw everything come together? Was that just like pretty mind blowing?
It's pretty well every day. There's no one day that was any less than another. It was depending on the sets you were at, upper Anjero, lower Anjero, whether you're at Osaka, at Clavel, and the street scenes and the shops. It was everywhere. That was the amazing part.
What about you, Lisa and Jonathan? What were your thoughts when you finally got to see it all kind of come together? Or did they let you leave your workshop?
Oh, they did. Yeah, no,
They did,
we
good.
were on set quite a bit. We had
Oh, you
guys
were.
that
I'm sure
at
you would have to
jobs
be,
most of the time. But it was amazing. It was to see the costumes and the sets and everything when they walked in, and it was you were speechless. It was you'd been transformed into a different time, a different era, a different world that you're used to. And as Carlos said earlier, it all worked. It worked beautifully. Like call it luck, call it whatever you would like to, but it was hard work. But I mean, it really was incredible, and it was emotional, and it was mind blowing. Honestly, so.
And when Mother Nature cooperated on the morning it snowed in Upper Azuro.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right, Helen?
Oh, it was gorgeous. Absolutely. Like all the thatched roofs with snow on them were just to die for. And then the snow started melting during the day, and the special effects guys were up the hill. They were shoveling snow into a pickup truck and driving it down and redressing the snow, because we weren't expecting it. But I did love that set particularly, because we were nestled in this little mini valley, as it were, and we got to experience all the different seasons.
Yeah.
So we had massive, gorgeous autumn color. We had spring, we had winter, and rain, lots of rain. And I loved the rain. Rain actually saturated everything. and that was my favorite set. Was the samurai village, with the snow was gorgeous. I wanted more of it.
I loved the set too until we had to put together the largest food scene known to mankind up there.
That's right.
And we were at the Swiss Gun Club, and they let me go into the clubhouse and use the kitchen so that we could prepare all these trays and trays of food. There was 28 people in the room. I kept in production meetings going like 28 trays. That's 56 trays plus multiples plus resets, 4 days worth of food. I'm just losing it. And our kitchen's 500 feet from set.
Yeah.
And the set is our set. Like Jason got on set and had to commandeer the kitchen part of the set and say, this is for props. This is where we take the trays when you're moving your cameras around and relighting. No one can be in here. No video village. No this, that.
Yeah.
Nuts.
So we have a little bit of time left before we wrap up. I just want to ask each of you, maybe if you have one thing, I was going to ask you your biggest challenge, but I'm just going to ask you what your biggest triumph was, and it can be anything. So Carlos, why don't I start with you, put you on the spot. What was your biggest triumph, do you feel?
My biggest triumph, I think it was really to understand the Japanese culture, the Japanese aesthetic, as much as as I could, and to portray it in a way that the Western audience could understand it. So I think that was my biggest triumph. I think because I've never done anything that was related to the Japanese culture. I've never even put my feet in Japan. We were supposed to, but then it was post-COVID and all the borders were closed. So hopefully if there is a season 2, then I'll be able to go there and do research. But this was all new to me. So the fact that we all started from a white canvas and we learn about a culture that, that we don't know anything about, and that we were able to produce the visuals to this incredibly ambitious project is a big triumph on its own, because it was a lot of work and it was a labor of love. And it took the effort of all of us, all our teams, to work together in order to produce this, and that's a miracle, honestly, because we were working around the clock nonstop and surviving to make this show. And I don't think that any of us even thought about any awards or that this show would be one day nominated for 25 Emmys. I think genuinely our crew, and I give the credit to the Canadian crew, were passionately in love with this production, and they gave their all to make it work. And I don't think that anybody else in the world would have been able to produce this project the way it was. It tried to be made in other countries. I don't know why the reasons were that it didn't happen, but the Canadians were the only ones that were able to make it. And working with them, I can tell you that not only they are the nicest people, but they also are incredibly talented. So I've always said it, in my interview with you, they are the ones that really made this happen.
That's very nice.
Well, Carl, who's in the chat, would say it's the maple syrup.
It's the maple syrup.
It's the maple syrup.
It's pretty good stuff.
It's sweet and delicious, and it makes us nice people. Helen, what about you? Is there a time, or is there something that you did that you feel super proud of?
It's very hard to say. I mean, my biggest triumph was getting through it alive, and well, I'm just feeling like I think I got partway, a couple of months into it, and I thought, yeah, I think I've got it now. I think I have, But then something would shoot out. I get a bogey, like, oh my god, I haven't thought of that. So it was just that sort of daily, weekly, hourly, just absorbing, keeping with it, never dropping the ball. And it was interesting doing a series because I hadn't done one before, and there's sort of turnover of directors. And, no sooner have you sort of locked in on one episode, then you're starting to do all your big meetings for the next episode. So it's like this sort of, every month you sort of get this refresh, like, oh, right, here's a new person, here's a new script, here's all the things that you've planned months ago. You just hope it's going to mesh. And I think things did mesh. There were very few things that went completely sideways, if I can think of any. So I feel like that to me was the biggest triumph, was just managing it all and feeling that we'd actually really pulled it off.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Lisa and Jonathan? I mean, because you work as a team. Oh, anything that comes to mind for you, triumph-wise?
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Lisa. No, well, I get to go first. Okay. I mean, what Helen and Carlos said is really the true thing, and I will agree with Helen that when we made it to the end, to go, okay, we made it, great. That was a large triumph. To work with everybody that we were able to work with, it is a triumph in many ways. There's so many of them. There's so many wonderful people we got to meet. Wonderful people we got to talk to. Cultures that we had no or very little knowledge of prior to this show, and that the Japanese culture was incredible, and some of the Japanese people that we worked with and helped explain and helped us learn and helped us get through all of this were fabulous. So I mean, there are so many triumphs along the road on this show that you can look at, small ones, large ones. And I can't really pick one specific triumph, but I mean everything that the show has done. And when I pushed play and watched the first episode and that came up, and the Erasmus and everything, it was I kind of just went, oh, okay, that was good. So
And I also think when they held sort of the screenings of what they did in this, that they got a lot of people together and let the crew kind of see where they were at, and it was really you get to see the dailies, but to see how they're editing it together, to see how the subtitles are working, to see the expression of this type of acting that is distinct to the Japanese, with the character and the expression that showed on their faces, and you take then the color palettes and everything, it really became magical. And especially after, I don't think we've ever had been able to build that much, fabricate, pour aluminum, have our own foundries in a set deck shop, and trying to get these items historically correct and accurate was a process. And to see it all come together, and all these challenges that we all had on a daily basis was magical. There's no other word for it.
You just brought up something, just the subtlety of the Japanese actors, vocally, visually, gesturally. It's funny, it's very hard to really get a feel for that when you watch the dailies, because they're rather dry. And it's when you see edited sequences, you go, oh my God, like this, like the power of what they're actually doing, and they're vocally and visually was fantastic. It really jumped off the screen to me. Yeah.
What about you, Dean? I know you think you're retired, and so
Keep thinking that,
I don't
Dean.
think that's
Keep
happening.
thinking.
But was there a Did you feel a sense of triumph on any particular thing, or just as a whole? What were your feelings on this?
Seriously, my feeling by the time I finished that show, that had been almost 2 years of my life. I think all of us spent most of the time with our heads down, just going day in, day out. Really didn't have a true feel of how the show was going to turn out. And it was only when it started airing in the new year that it started to hit me. And then when the Emmy Awards were announced and the nominees, that just was the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
And it's really nice when a show this beautiful is acknowledged by everyone's peers, and every department is being recognized. It doesn't matter, there's sound department, there's special effects, there's vis effects, there's costumes, there's hair, there's the
Music.
VFX music, there's the makeup. It just goes on and on. Everyone, it's proof right there what it took. And
Yeah,
the fact that we're being acknowledged for it.
I think it's wonderful. By the way, I read that it's the first time and correct me if I'm wrong, a foreign language film has been nominated for Best Series. Is that correct?
Where the language is Yeah.
foreign language series. Yeah, a non-English series.
That's
Is that
right.
correct?
Yeah, there was.
Yep.
Hi, Lorelai. So that's a
Then
milestone.
don't forget about
And 25
Cosmos.
award and 25. Sorry.
Don't forget
Go
about
ahead.
the Portuguese. I mean, they were all great.
Oh
They
yeah, of course. Yes.
bonded everything else together. I mean, Cosmos, that guy, I just was amazed at all the time. I really loved being with him on set and working on different things. That opening sequence when he's taking these soundings with the sand at the bottom. He and I kind of worked on that for a long time, and I researched it. And yeah, when it makes it to the screen and it makes sense, God, I'm very happy.
Well, I want to thank all of you so much. We're out of time, but I just wanted to ask if is there a season 2? Do we know? Is there any talk about this? Some discussion? I know there has been a little bit of flapping online about it. Anyone know?
I mean, I think we know as much as you do. I think based on what
Sure.
what's in the press. I think they're gonna, if there are more seasons, I think there is only 2 more seasons. And definitely the writers are working on season 2, and it all depends if they're able to find a plot and a storyline that really works. And so it's still up in the air. I mean, Dean always knows much more than me, so maybe you could tell us. But for right now, I think it's all TBD, and I think they're working on the storyline. They're writing the scripts, and then if they come up with a really great idea and that everybody in the studio is excited about it, then they will move forward with it. After 25 nominations, I think that it would be great that we move forward.
Yeah, it would be great.
Yeah.
Yes, I have to agree with that.
Yeah. So, Dean, are you able to spill the tea on that, or are you sworn to silence?
I
Or
have
do you even
no
know?
more information than anyone else. I have my own theories that I'm not going to get into here. I think yes, there's going to be a second and third season. Based on the success.
Yeah, Hiro Sanada is the one who's been out there, I think, talking. So
we'll
have to see. He's a producer
for that information.
We'll have to keep our fingers crossed, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
It's so good
and
to
I hope
see everyone again. It's was such
wonderful to see
family,
everybody.
and we miss you all.
Miss you too, guys.
Well, I'm really happy that Dean actually put this together. So thanks so much, Dean, for bringing everyone together. This has been an amazing experience having all of you together, because even though I'm a costume channel, I'm always super fascinated to learn about other departments, and I know our audiences, and also because the other thing is that, the cast, and, don't get me wrong, because they're fabulous. The cast on the show, they get a lot of attention, but sometimes it's nice to give some attention to the people who work behind the scenes, right? And give them an opportunity to tell everybody what their process is. And so thank you so much. And I've put everyone's, we'll go around. Carlos, I know you're on Instagram. Is there anywhere else people can find you?
So yeah, my handle on Instagram is the Carlos Rosario. It's so easy. And that's it. That's it.
And yeah, and you've got a big following over there. So I'm a big fan of yours, of course. And you've got an awesome new movie coming out. Excited to talk to you about that. And Dean, what about you? You're also on Instagram. What's the best place to find you?
Dreammaker YVR on Instagram. And I'm Dean Eilertson on Facebook. Those are the only 2 I check out.
Helen, where can everyone find you? Are you on? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dean.
No, I just carefully upload things, on the last show I was working on. Once the director put up a picture on Instagram of the chair back of the show announcing that it was officially started, then you can take that picture and share it and not get in trouble for it. So that's the kind of stuff you'll find on my site. Teaser stuff.
That's awesome. Well, and I think that, in the old days, we didn't have Instagram. So, the people couldn't see all the processes going on and all the behind the scenes pictures. So this has created a whole new sort of group of people who are able to see all the behind the scenes. Helen, what about you? Do you post online, or are you not a person who likes to do that?
I fly under the radar a bit. I haven't quite got into that. I have a website though.
Oh, you do? Okay, great.
Well, I
Okay.
just did it recently because I thought, well, I better get smart, get another job, and yeah. So helenjarvis.com.
Awesome. Jonathan, what about you? Oh, actually,
Uh,
Jonathan, I do know. I think you're on social media.
I am. I don't post as much as my lovely wife, Lisa, because she's the commander in chief. I just follow. But mine is Jonathan Lancaster 357 on Instagram, and then I'm just Jonathan Lancaster on Facebook.
Amazing, Lisa. So you are active on Instagram.
Yes, Jonathan's not as quiet as what you think. Yeah. Anyway, good for a giggle. Yes, I do Lisa Lancaster on Facebook, and then Lisa Lancaster Travels on Instagram as well as YouTube, and it's mainly more of our own videos that we create for when we aren't working and we are immersed in culture and travel and history. But sometimes we can post things about the shows, and a lot of times our assistant Jay Kent will post photos, and he'll link that onto the Instagram account, and you can see photos of the sets once the show has aired. And we have permission from the network, and he'll post that onto the Instagram account.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining me today. This has been such a pleasure. And thanks for everybody in the chat who is here today as well, leaving comments and some really lovely comments about the show that people have been making. So thank you so much. You'll be able to see that on the replay as well. So anyway, everyone, I hope you have a wonderful week. It was actually a long weekend for me, so today is my first day of the week, just so you know. Well, actually, my fellow Canadians as well. So anyway, take care and have an awesome day. Bye.
Right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for having us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.